Welcome to the Developer Success Podcast. For this episode, I had a riveting conversation with Ben Gamble from Aiven. And we had like a little pre-conversation. When we started recording, we immediately dropped into it, and it was a little bit abrupt. So that's why I wanted to do a really short intro besides the more official intro. So when we start the conversation, Ben Gamble from Aiven, who is a brilliant developer advocate who's doing amazing work, has got some fascinating personal projects also. You'll hear him talking about discoverability and the importance of that, and then also about ecosystems like Kubernetes and the role of API in those ecosystems, and how APIs there are almost kind of like a utility rather than like a custom-built product that only fits for one Kubernetes cluster, for example. So I hope you'll enjoy our conversation, and thank you for listening. Enjoy.
The thing we're talking about right now is discoverability.
Yes.
This comes from the ground up, from everything from Apache Atlas and data discoverability to your data description languages to things like how do I manage schemas, how do I manage nodes, how do I even orchestrate? Like one of the weirdest wins Kubernetes really gave was the ability to actually know what you were running. It gave you that piece. But as you go up and up and up and you say, what APIs does this even have? You get things like the idea of API docs, but then you realize API docs are only as good as where you find the docs themselves. And this is developer portals. And this is what I'll call that wonderful middle bar now. Go below that, you're into what the API really does, and rather than what the APIs actually expose, because there are always more APIs. We never expose all of them. So I gave a talk at KubeCon London called API Design in the Distributed World, about which went on and on about the abstractability of APIs and how much they can and can't be abstracted. Because it's a mess, too abstract, and no one gets any control. Too real, and it's like you're exposing implementation details people can either abuse or ask the wrong questions about.
How much of the affordance needs to be in your API design? Should you actually because I had this conversation with Marsh Gardner that because I was arguing that APIs should be utilities rather than products.
Ooh. Fascinating. I know about that. So I argue that APIs are wholly standalone products, as in they are standalone. As in, I argue for facades these days, which is you have an internal API and an external API. The external API is a separate service. Sorry, a service, not a product. It's a service. It's because a product might be a part of the API. No, the API itself is a service. It stands alone. Never consider your API anything less than a whole business unit on its own.
Yes. And the product is a wrapper around it.
A product can be a wrapper or a subpart. It's on a different dimension. Yeah. Because and this is what I was actually a friend of mine I've been helping through his little transition in his career. He's now an exec at the bank. He works out from the tech side, basically purely on API design work. And what's cool is the idea, the problem is they have core banking systems which are old, slow, whatever, right? As you start shelling out from those, you've got to wrap them in APIs. So I said, the first rule of this kind of thing is you do not let external call to do internal call. You've got to decouple that, right? And it isn't just put it in a Kafka pipe and hope, right? You've got a service there which has a full, let's say, REST spec API, gRPC API, it doesn't matter, right? But that decides how and when to call the inside service, and decides is the key word.
Yes,
because you could cache it, and that's the trick. It's like, why not put a cache in every layer? Suddenly, your internal service never gets thrashed.
And also security, because even if you trust the application,
I don't trust my developers. I don't trust me as the developer. First rule of developers: can we not trust them today?
And it's going to get worse, because now if you build applications with AI or with LLMs inside. Yes. They're going to do whatever. So you will not be able to predict anymore what an application is supposed, or what it's supposed to do. This thing about APIs as utility, for me, that means that right now the end customer of an API product. So we have the separate market of API products, where the developer is the customer, or at least the kingmaker. But actually, if you look at the bigger picture, developer is not really a customer. It's just a facilitator. Exactly. So actually, APIs are like semi-finished goods. like in industry.
Oh my gosh, yes. So this was the discussion literally 2 hours ago. where
Okay.
I'm trying to adjust the tech stack. So the perfect example of this is I'm selling you a logging tool, right?
Mhm.
What use is that to your e-commerce customers? Tangential at best. What it does is an internal productivity gain, right? But even more so, who is the economic buyer? You're familiar with the term the MEDPIC sales criteria,
Yeah.
right? The problem ends up being is your champion is the one who's probably going to use it. Your economic buyer is never your champion. They're only why, not why now.
But what does that all mean for this? Because right now, basically, we have this assumption that, like, we have all these banks, like everybody is trying to sell API products, and it's like,
Yeah.
are you in the business of semi-finished goods? Like, really?
So that's what Aiven is. Aiven's whole business mantra right now is we just sell you a Postgres node, pretty much, right? With some guarantees. It's not really a managed service, I could call it, but it's managed, but it's not in the same way, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what level of granularity do you need to control at? And I think what you're getting at actually is discovering the level of granularity you need.
Yeah.
That I think might be even more relevant, because let's say, like, because here's a common thing. It's like, I need to store I have some data to store. Do you want it in Excel? Yes. Well, no, I need more than Excel. Okay. So do you just want a place you can dump it? Yes. What do you need to do with it? Query it. I need to find the bits I need. Just the bits or all of it at once? All of it at once. Okay. Behind the scenes, it becomes S3. You find the granularity you need, and your service discovers that. But it's basically like, if you imagine, the problem ends up being of the supersets and subsets data.
Yeah.
You're basically playing a bunch of what's it called? I forget. Combinatoric theory behind the scenes to just work out category theory. Sorry, behind the scenes to work out if this thing is of that thing. Set theory. That's not set theory.
Set theory. Oh
Yes.
God, it's.
I was rereading some combinatoric stuff recently on category theory, because I was listening to a podcast with Simon Peyton Jones in it, and my friend was like, "I used to program in Haskell. It's been a while." But,
So
yeah, so you can.
I've missed all of that because I'm not a developer. Because I've heard my friends, mathematics friends, talk about it. That was like really hard course. Yeah.
So I was an astrophysicist long ago.
Right.
So if you roll back to the core thing here, it is as the CEO, I don't care about data storage. I care that the data is reliable, right? I want to answer my shareholders that we're not going to lose anything, right?
Yes.
As the CTO, I want to be able to answer to our customers that when they need their cat videos load, right?
Yeah.
As the VP of engineering, I have to answer to the board that it didn't cost too much to store those cat videos, right? But then, as the principal engineer who's leading the cat video compression project, right? My goal is to choose a piece of is basically because above that, as the abstractions have gotten fine, as we strip away abstractions, we're at a point now where I have to make a call whether it's S3 or Google Storage, and if the API is fast enough.
Yeah.
So suddenly it's like, what I need to be able to do is, if I want to have a proper conversation with somebody about it, let's say, is I need to know what level of detail they need and the price and how much that detail costs me in time and money, because that's the dial. Because discoverability is, if I discover down, I'm increasing my time cost.
Yeah. But that is the cost perspective. There's also the value perspective.
Well, yes, but in theory, what it is driving my value.
Well, not necessarily, because there's cost-based pricing where
Yes.
you're charging for what it costs you, but there's also value-based pricing where you're like, so how much money are you gonna make like selling this single thing to this one customer?
Basically, the problem with Aiven right now is Aiven has been weirdly successful, weirdly so, and that is a problem, because it means there's a lot of attitudes which haven't been thoroughly tested.
Right.
Yes.
Well, two questions I'm asking, like that is basically determining our business strategy. It's like, one, can we make the jump towards a broader audience where developer portals, which are for developers, can turn into interface portals, which are for basically everybody?
So the word I'd use is product portals, because whether all the APIs are product doesn't really, the API is a product half the time, and the service the API drives is the product, but sometimes you just want the whole thing, and that might be, so let's say you're buying so buying Salesforce, right? Salesforce has an API. You want to do that. You want to so you say, I need something to manage to be a CRM, right? So I go through my CRM discovery. There's HubSpot over there, Salesforce there. So I go Salesforce. Okay, that's great. I want a bit of that. I need the APIs. The API side of it opens up. And it's just like the tier as you kind of open the boxes as you go down. But also, you then can do the fun one, which is because you'll be smart about how you tag your data, you'll do something about the idea of alerting customers will be your search, right?
Yeah.
You say alerting customers, and then you'll narrow it through, CRMs and whatever. And you'll come down the list of like, under the category of Salesforce, you'll have the list of features. The category of HubSpot, the list of features and APIs. And then they'll be bucketed by what? It's like and you can even bucket them by persona, like as a salesperson, as a developer, as a CISO.
Well, and also like how does that turn into a marketing thing? Because if we can get marketing excited about this, there's a whole new lifeline for our whole industry. Like I've heard people in DevRel are really hurting a lot right now. There's a whole bunch of redundancies that have happened.
Oh, absolutely crazy. So I'm right now on a technicality, I'm in product marketing.
Right.
So I lead enterprise and solution marketing right now.
Yeah. Yes.
And then what's interesting is like, I suppose, so my DevRel Con talk was about like remember the keynote? You remember the closing keynote?
Yes. Oh yeah.
It had problems.
Yes.
It was, and what was worse is it was coming at it without thinking about the real, like there is a problem. It was just saying we have a problem. It wasn't saying there's a solution.
Yeah.
I was trying to go across the other way, which is that we are actually exactly where we've ever been, except the dials have just dialed up on the pressure, right?
Yeah.
So all that ever matters is if you can show your line value to Salesforce, the CFO, whoever, you are just as safe as you've ever been, right?
Yeah.
The difference is the tide which was buoying up all the craziness is gone.
Yes.
Right.
It's the everybody who's swimming naked, like now the tide has gone out. Now we know.
And the problem is that DevRel did not help itself due to a lot of inexperienced DevRel managers who never did DevRel when it was still hard to justify your existence.
Yeah, right. And
I've always gone down that so when I was head of DevRel ably, I literally, while I was allowed to, I had pipeline coverage as my OKR.
Yeah,
It's not hard a metric. I was like, I want a real one.
Yeah.
Show me the CRM. We'll actually we will assign leads which we generate. But back to your point about what this is useful for, right? So the massacre in DevRel actually highlights a very more important thing, which is actually, if you take it one step further, is what the economic climate has driven. So it used to be that in a very strong growth market, it's the game is positive sum. You can win and your rival can win. And you might jab each other once in a while. As the climate turns down and it's now an active downturn, the game is negative sum, which no longer you must just fight to crush your rivals, you now must fight to survive your customers. So what that means is, if I have discoverability if I'm more discoverable, I can do two interesting things, which is one, people are more likely to engage with my products in a better way. Let's say I am Atlassian, right? Mm-hmm. I have 20 products roughly. They all do different things. The problem is you don't know which one does what. Do I do this in Jira or Confluent? Do I do this on the API? Do I do it by hand? Do I do it by mail?
Yeah.
It's Atlassian. You do it by interpretive dance. I kid you not. Look into the AWS solutions pages, right? And half of them are real physical solutions, like whole baked products, right? But it's a mess. I have no idea what I'm going to get when I click on one of those boxes.
Yeah.
Literally, I was looking at this yesterday for that previous thing I was showing you, right? I didn't even put the hyperscalers in because they're so messy. But if you look at the AWS portal of solutions, right? Start clicking through it. You'll end up at solutions for self-driving car, like training things. And then they train self-driving cars. That's a whole product. But also, you go a bit further down, you find the API for RDS. And it's all in the same place. And it's a mess. And there's no way to drill down from, I have this problem to, I want this solution.
Exactly. So we have this in a place where there's a lot of value connected to it, which is like find the right product so that people will buy your product bundle. But we also have this in just straight up customer service. The question is, so you said product portal, but I need to go and check like what is the category for product portal, and is there something out there already?
I
there's
don't
somebody
know. That's the thing. I'm using just terms I'm throwing together right now.
Yeah, but it's a good one because I was interface portal, and people are like, I have no idea what is an interface.
So the only problem I have interface. The problem with interface is a very insider baseball term.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas product portal, because the product is the interface. Most people don't realize that. They think Salesforce is just that dashboard, and to be honest, 90% of it is just that dashboard.
Yes.
Right. The weird database behind the scenes, no one cares. It could be running off Excel sheets, and actually probably more reliable to run off Excel sheets.
Yeah. Well, so what I started thinking, but I don't know if it's wishful thinking. I'm pretty excited. I'm really excited about this. So when I say that APIs are like an interface utility, what I think is I'm seeing right now, that I would love to hear what you think, is that just the same way streaming water was like our first utility, and it gave us sanitation, and because of that, cities became possible. The next really big utility is electricity. And electricity actually started in the Industrial Revolution. It was basically when we started commoditizing non-biological work or a non-biological power. This is the start of the journey that got us all the way to electricity, that you just plug something in and you have machines that can do stuff. Now, I think that what alternating current is for electricity, APIs are for interfaces. That they are a utility, like a standardization layer that is turning interfaces into utility.
I 100% agree. I find the analogy slightly strange, but I agree with the concept entirely. Entirely. 100% with you on what you mean. I get where the analogy is coming from. It's mostly just me thinking about alternating current, which is basically my brain is being too specific about alternating current. I 100% agree. The commoditization of work, the commoditization of labor, it's like the monetary system. It's like, what does money let you do? Money lets you go beyond a feudal system.
Yes.
Because now you can accumulate wealth in enough places that you can now act upon larger scale initiatives.
But money is a commodity. It's a commodity
of time and effort.
Oh, but money became a utility when electronic banking was introduced.
We got better than that. So when 14th century double entry accounting allowed loans to be real, right, and usury laws got rolled back, what happened is now money is fully fungible, because money was pointedly non-fungible for a while, right?
Right.
So when you get to full electronic banking, money is truly liquid, because liquidity. The liquidity gap was serious, and the reason why we can now have crashes and things is because of liquidity. But also why we have a really interesting society is liquidity. Electronic banking gave us the ability to make liquidity truly real, right? My biggest knock against economic systems, if you're familiar with the efficient markets theorem and this, right, is no market is even remotely efficient. Yeah. But what happens in a semi-efficient market is you can do the liquidity tricks where you push liquidity to a place, you have great utility because of high liquidity, and you do cool stuff. But the problem is that we could have always done that, but there's a bit of this weird fact of humans are bizarrely irrational.
Yes.
Right. However, weirdly predictable.
So I hadn't thought about money as also utility.
The thing is, right, everything comes down, if you treat everything as quantized time and effort, the more money does represent a unit of time and effort.
One of the questions I was chewing on was, are APIs like a contagious utility that is like taking over? So money is becoming also intermediated through APIs.
Yes.
Telecommunications is intermediated through APIs. Is this a contagious thing?
I would say communication is the intermediary, and APIs are the current new communication medium. Mm-hmm. It's like the telephone versus the mail, right? But everything became, I can do this over, you remember mail order catalogs, send off for it. Then it became phone order catalogs, ring in your thing. Then it became an internet catalog. Then it became an app, right? And as the APIs got better, it now became an aggregation of apps through someone else's app.
But it's also because APIs now represent the utility of everything. Like you can use it for computing.
Commoditization is the wrong word. It is democratization. That's the word. The problem with specialized access has always been the problem, right? Yeah. Like you can only access your bank when you walked into the building previously.
Yes.
Right. And that is that's the bank program interface. Was the guy behind the screen, rather than the thing poking on his desk computer, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, that computer is now talking to your computer because we have a better communication method. And that's the API piece has moved and improved, and the better APIs get, the more discoverable they get, the more accessible they get.
So one of the fundamental questions I have is, will API design standardize? Because the three economies model from I know, right? So Jay Bloom, you know him or
I remember the name. I can't remember why.
So he has the three economies model. It's basically there's like if you have a team, you can't have them working in scale modes and in differentiation modes at the same time. That just doesn't work. Like what you were saying earlier, like VP of engineering is trying to reduce cost. VP of marketing is trying to increase variety so that you can capture more value from your customers. What he says is that there's a third economy, which is an economy of scope that sits in the middle of those two, and that provides reusable chunks of scope that are making it possible to have both scaling and differentiation at the same time. And those reusable pieces of scope are things that become better from reuse. And he was like, APIs are clearly one of those. And like you see Kubernetes, the fact that, this basically API standards kind of spread like wildfire and sparked this whole ecosystem.
Docker being a perfect example, right? Is what happens if everything's just a container? Then Kubernetes was what happens if we make the container runtime standardized?
Yeah.
Right? And then eBPF inside that and all that kind of jazz. And then it's like, of course, REST is the biggest winner here of all time.
Yes. What are APIs then really? Because right now the API industry is saying APIs are products. And that's like dogma. But actually, like as you said, it's like there's something not right. And Marsh Gardner says that some APIs are products and some are not. And it's like depends if it's a socio-technical API or not. If there's multiple people involved. What I'm imagining is that this interface transformation is like it's doing like a whole bunch of things at the same time. It's like action at a distance. Like what you said, like your computer talks to somebody else's computer on the other end of the world, and it goes almost immediately. There's the ability to get information, like massive amounts, sort stuff, AI. All of these things become available through APIs. But and we can look at all of these things independently, and we can say. So we have now cloud computing, and that's like computing as a service. So basically, we're turning computing into utility. But I wonder, isn't it really that an interface has become a utility? It's like a gateway utility for the utility of everything. Yeah. It's that because it's interfaces. Because interfaces, by definition, are about where different systems meet each other. I'm working on this presentation. I'll be doing I've finally done a major overhaul for my strategy webinar, which it's going to be about this. It's like so if interfaces are utilities, what does that mean for your dev world?
Just so you're aware, this is super. So the talk I gave was the most attended talk in person at that QCon, pretty much.
Ooh.
That's how much of a big deal this is. Everyone is caring about this so much right now. So the one I want to do next is actually about that. Is basically about. So originally I wanted to do more about data. I was saying how basically the golden hammer, the golden hammer of all data problems right now, right? Because everything is in Kafka, and I'm like, bullshit, that's terrible. Everything's by REST API. That's even worse.
Yes.
Everything is in this tool or that tool because we want to unify it in one place. And I'm like, no.
Yes.
And this is the thing, right? And this is where APIs get very complicated. Is everyone is just like the REST API was designed for one thing, and one thing originally, which was representational state transfer. Like uploads and downloads are already a stretch on what an API is for.
Yes.
When you start doing things like streaming or worse still, this is the one that really gets people. It's like if you really want to do proper what's it called? Command and control systems, right? Where you got to do RPCs through REST, you are in a bad place because hanging connections kills REST service. They're not designed for it, right? And you always end up with this problem like, am I impedance matching my API to my data source?
Yeah.
And like, so this is the whole part of the talk was about this, but really I've just turned into a bit of a kind of exploration of where things are. So a big point I've been trying to make about APIs is a thing. So I said safe API design. So, SOAP from, not SOAP, sorry. Do you remember solid design principles for object-oriented?
Yes.
So I said, really, your microservices and their APIs are an object. Treat them with the same pattern, the solid pattern. It must have single responsibility. It must have encapsulation. It must, be open and closed pretty easily, right? Don't do substitution, but that's the only one I say don't do. But all of the solid principles apply to API design because that's what it is. Your microservice and its API is your object because your API is your interface to your object.
Yes.
And suddenly you get this wonderful thing where you can have multiple objects responding to the same interface because that's allowed. So what does it all mean? Well, I can say everything and nothing, but the core, here's what it really boils down to. There is to build systems correctly at this day and age, right? We are building systems which are getting bigger. The only thing we know for a fact is they're getting bigger. And we know for a fact they're distributed. So it becomes incumbent. So it's no longer about, are you resilient or am I resilient? It is, are we resilient?
Yes.
Right? So this is where we come back to what are we resilient to? Because this is the problem I have in most engineering circles is eventually you will have to accept some failure. What level of resilience do you require? I always say resilience or durability for this one because are you resilient to your API changing? My API changing? I'm your payment provider. What happens when my API change? Should your call break? And I argue very strongly that your API should be versioned. Yes. You should start getting warned. But I will never want you to have a partially complete state. The nothing makes me more uncertain than an uncertain response. Machines are wonderfully yes and no. Like I want a success or a failure. I don't want a partially complete result. I don't want you to do your best effort. I want you to either succeed or fail. Because I can only reason about success and failure. Because if I can't, and this is what I mean by the whole idea of substitution. It's like if you don't substitute APIs, but you can interface APIs. So like if you're a payment service and PayPal's a payment service, and I want to use either of you, I should be able to have an API that substitutes. It doesn't substitute you but it should interface for both of you. Right? They'll do the work to make it both work. So, payment provider, you're a subclass of payment provider, they're a subclass of payment provider. Not everything will work at this interface layer. I have to choose the right one. Occasionally, I have to be specific. But what it means is you then get the ability to say, for the things I care about, you are good enough.
In the banking sector, there now PSD3 is coming. And PSD3 has standardization of API design in there.
Really?
I at least I've read that in some of the documents. Telcos have GSMA, MEC, Camara. These are all basically standardization efforts for creating standard APIs that all of them will be implementing.
So like open banking, yes. It's getting there.
Well, open banking was everybody has to have APIs and we don't care how they're designed and everybody just did whatever. So right now, a big chunk of the value of DevRel is predicated on having the best developer experience is going to create lock-in effect because our design is different and switching, there's a switching cost.
Yes, and actually this is what I'm trying to reverse actively. Because Aiven, and this is what I now own the message, so I get to change this. Aiven's, I have issues with Aiven, but they're for another day. Here's Aiven's strength, which is it isn't special. That's actually its biggest strength because all the APIs are a commodity, right? Postgres is a commodity. Kafka is a commodity. Well, only thing that actually matters is it going to be on time? Is it backed up? Is it reliable? And can it talk to the next one with an SLA? And Aiven's actual moat is in the SLAs between the services and your complexity reduction.
I think this special snowflake strategy that everybody's been doing is just not going to keep working. Like you can't have every bank trying to make the best developer experience and then have different APIs all over the place. And then people need to go and build integrators for 200 banks and they're all slightly different. Also, AI is going to accelerate this.
Your product discovery portal becomes super powerful when you start putting AI on top of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it the product one, interface one. Either it really doesn't matter. But the advantage you have it's a piece of kit I am personally working on, right? Now, software functions have type definitions and they tell you roughly what they do. Now imagine you want to do a series of actions, one after another, to complete an event. Buy something, order a pizza, dig a hole. Doesn't really matter, right?
Mhm.
So you have a series of tools that get you from A to B. But the problem ends up being is you need to line up all the different A's and B's in a line to get you to B. There is actually a whole branch of AI research from the 60s that defines how to do this in a microsecond.
Oh, wow.
It's used heavily in games development, and I've spent half my career using it regularly. So it's about action plans, they're called. And the trick really is, how do you turn an action plan into an executable without actually having to do any of the work? Because there's two very complicated bits in the middle. But the core of the matter is, I can basically use this to do a dependency resolution solver, which will automatically solve all the dependencies. And more importantly, I am dependent on completing these 10 functions. It'll give you the steps to take to complete all your dependencies in a line. And I can execute that plan.
So this is...
It relies on discoverability tools like what you're describing.
Yeah. So this is the big thing, right? This is what's coming next. Like if we are all going to have... Well, I don't know how fast this AI wave is going to go and how far it will go.
Yes.
But if the LLM wave really fulfills its promise, we're soon going to have a device that has an LLM, probably on device, that's doing a bunch of stuff.
It's weirdly fast. I reckon that's going to be the weird one. Of like, no one's going to think it's possible, and there might even be a new phone vendor, the one who gets the chips right.
Yeah. Yes. So, and when that happens, basically everybody needs to switch gears, because now they have to have all their interfaces discoverable so that they can facilitate this kind of dependency resolution. And a bunch of other stuff, like so that because
other stuff,
because it's one of the main reasons for PSD2 or PSD, like the directive, as far as I understood it, was that people started building these interface scrapers that were just, you would make an order and then it would ask you to log in, but actually in the background it was logging into your bank accounts and making a transfer instead of you, which is ridiculously dangerous.
Yes. So I demonstrated that to a few people as a demonstration of a man in the middle of attack on some of these things 10 years ago, and no one listened.
So, but then basically the directive was to prevent this, right? I think.
They try. So the trust authority thing, and like the way to get, where can we put trust in the system?
Yeah.
So the short version is it sort of works, but like it's not. All you have to do is make it sufficiently irritatingly difficult. That really smart people could, but if you're really smart, there's so many easier ways to make money. Yeah. That's the big deal.
Yeah.
Like so many easier ways to make money.
Yeah. Well, no, I one of our colleagues got his whole savings cleaned out by.
So the UK has a very interesting rule about this, which is the banks were supposed to fix this. They were just enforced by law. And the FCA here basically says, oh, it happened because they spoofed your website. You're refunding all of that.
Nice.
It's a forced refund. It's the only thing I've ever seen that made banks hire people correctly. Like I kid you not, like for retail banks, hiring people correctly is a phenomenal idea. It's like, pay a developer a non-trivial sum of money. No. Yeah. Like I remember interviewing, it was like a VP of product at like Barclays Bank, and it was retail side, and it was like, that is like the number came up, and I'm like, wait, what? That's considerably less than I'm currently paid. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
considerably less. Like now it's like half. It's a far more senior role with 150 people reporting up to it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell are you playing at? You can't keep doing this. And they do.
Yeah. So
sorry, but like, here's me back to the discoverability thing. So here's one of the aspects of discoverability, which is, what are the edges of this system? Like, what are the guarantees? Because a lot of what happens, back to resilience again, is what are your failure modes? And that's one thing that's not exposed very often. It's like, you come with a 99.9% SLA. What happens when you drop it the ball? Do you fail safe? Do you fail open? Do you fail how?
Are you familiar with residuality theory?
No, I'm now.
Yes. So I'm going to have an interview with Barry O'Reilly, who is the inventor of residuality theory, and it's basically it's like a resilient. It's a way to design resilient systems by looking at like completely catastrophic, crazy things you can imagine that make the system fail. And the idea is that failure states are attractors, so that there's only so many failure states in the system, and that by challenging a system with like weird crap that, that even if it like Godzilla attacks your city or something like that it will surface the failure states, and then you can start designing the system to change which failure states you will allow for.
Okay, I understand them. There's a whole like there's a way. There's a whole category of formal proof in programming about this stuff, but it's very much at the low level, not the high level. That's at the high level. I'd love to know about this high level stuff though, because I've done the low level version of this. So
this is a talk, but if you look for
the talk is perfect. That talk is perfect. Right, I'm gonna solve that onto my own personal system in a second. Put that into my. I have a file, a Google sheet shared between myself and myself on accounts, so I can just share links quickly between the two.
Yeah.
Oh, it's NDC on the top.
So he's I'll be also interviewing him. I think first of all, thank you for humoring me and going into the utility, the utility.
You're into an area of very deep personal interest as you can guess from like that talk I gave at KubeCon and a few others, because like there's a couple of. There's a really interesting talk by Anna McDonald from Kafka Summit last year about basically streaming systems in brownfield and legacy deployments. I have it on hand somewhere. 1 second.
Pragmatic patterns for
yes. I cannot recommend a talk. It was the best talk at last Kafka Summit.
Okay.
Hands down, in my opinion, as in the most interesting.
Cool.
Right. Because it's all about the idea of you've got to link up all these systems, not all of which will talk the same protocols, not all of which even make remote sense. And this is where I think, by the way, it's one of the things where I think you'll find really interesting is, are you familiar with the idea of completion criteria?
Not really. Not as a separate things.
Okay, so completion criteria is the idea of, I want to make a payment. How many steps does that require? Once I have all the steps, I have completed a payment. Right?
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
So what this says is I now have a way to be transactional over n systems. Right?
Right.
And this is really important because classically, of course, in banking, it is credit debit. That's one transaction. When you go further and say credit debit alert, guarantee other bank credit debits, right? You don't control all the bits suddenly.
Yeah.
Right? Suddenly, you now need to rely on an external system, which may or may not take an amount of time. And so what you say is, go do that there, go do that there, go do that there, go do that there. And the first thing I'll do is in my joining system, I say completion criteria for transaction from Christoph to his wife, right? And then as all the bits go beep, 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 and then when it completes, you emit the completion. But you can asynchronously join across n systems. And you now have an asynchronous transaction across n systems. It gets better. So I took what she was talking about and extended it because I've used it before, but without the name. I knew the technique, I just didn't know the name had a name. So the routing slip pattern is basically every step of the way your data goes through, you add a point of where I came from. So this gives you the full history. Like let's say you hop 3 databases through, perfect, we know what happened. But when you come to a completion criteria, if you put a time window on the join, you can then fail it successfully, as in correctly fail it. Of this has taken more than 10 minutes to go through. Maybe the bank on the other side has a problem. Let's undo every transaction point. APIs is really important because you can suddenly say, you need these 6 APIs, you need to call all of them. Would you like me to generate you an API that completes correctly?
Is anybody working on this kind of stuff, or where?
Like literally, almost went out. I was having a discussion with an old friend of how to build the whole thing. And I might end up actually putting on a contract to help me build some of the bits of it soon. So there are tools called durable. There are durable execution runtimes these days, right? The idea of functions that run durably in a way that means you can pause and resume them. They're resilient to failures, etc. I think they're boring because they've missed the point, which is the next piece, which is like Camunda Plus. Right, Camunda is really cool. I'm always surprised not more people are using Camunda.
Well, I'm trying to navigate the business landscape. Like, where's the real opportunity?
But
Where's the
what I just
interesting
defined,
piece?
right? So here's the value for what I've defined, right? Is it relies on the fact that most people are building internal developer portals. But now let's say I have a developer portal internally. I am Mercedes, right? I now want to build a new product that does these things. With what I'm currently working on, I can define this. I can basically define what I want and some bits and make a bill of materials of what it needs. My system will plan out a series of steps. Bit of AI, and then with a bit of AI magic, I can find all the APIs required for them, and then auto fill in all the gaps in those function calls.
Nice.
And suddenly, I want an API that says, when it's snowing in Berlin, message every Mercedes driver who's one of our subscribers not already got snow tires to get snow tires. And that can be a literal thing you can just define. Think of the APIs that involves. You need to know who your customers are, where they are, use the MQTT connections to check if they've got snow tires on. Weirdly very doable if you think about it. Weirdly straightforward, actually. But the problem is all the steps. And then guarantee the transactions across those steps. And so the key thing I have two innovations in this space. One is I know all the tech involved very well from personal experience as a developer on it. But the more interesting piece is I've made two innovations, which is the way that planning system works right now can't do this unless you do two changes, which is you change the fact that it goes across like it currently basically builds a path, and mine now builds a graph, which is a mathematically annoying difference, turns out.
And what are you going to do with this?
I'm slowly building it.
Yeah. So, but you're building a startup, or you're?
No. Currently, it's the core. I'm not open sourcing it unless I really want to at some later point. But right now, I'm building it because I want it for some of the other things I want to build. This is an evolution of everywhere I've been. I need a system like this. I've evolved 5 versions of this piece before every other company I've worked at or been CTO of. Right. I built an equivalency of this system somewhere.
Yeah.
At Aiven, we built one. We built a freaking, on top of Aiven, by the way, we built a full application controller runtime. And it would spawn machines, load them in with git stuff commands using more Aiven commands, fire more lambdas and more cyclical lambdas on top of itself, address where you ran out of machines, and rebuild present sets of machines for you. Because of this cyclical logic load, the way the cyclical logic works here with the state machines is so damn powerful. So that was like a really lightweight version of it, but it basically outperformed Kubernetes at being Kubernetes. So what happens if you then say take away the weirdnesses, which was just Ably being Ably, and strip away some of the the way it was supposed to function, and make it more generic, and now give it a tool to be able to fill in the gaps on that function. Because with the Ably one, I'm just finding there were some really magical lambdas we had to write. Now I can make the lambdas smaller and make them self-writing or self-discovering.
Yeah. But this is still a technical solution. So how do we turn it into
a business thing? The business domain thing is you ask for a thing, it can do it on a transaction.
Yeah.
Right? It can just do it.
Are you familiar with Superface from Zdeněk Němec?
The API portal thing.
So Superface is it's basically it's an automation thing.
Yes.
So they started with, we make an SDK for basically one generic SDK that then will connect to whatever API.
Yes, I remember these people. I wanted to get them onto. I was trying to get Ably into it, and I was fighting internally to get it. I like what these guys are doing a lot.
Yeah, so they've made a pivot towards AI, like an AI version of this. Yeah. It is connected to what you're describing.
So
but
the difference here is, I suppose, I started with the agent bits because I've been doing it. So my actual core expertise is agent systems.
Yes.
I do huge scale simulations. The games I build have millions of AI agents in them. And when ChatGPT came around, I was like, you solved the one issue I have. I kid you not, I spent 3 years. You're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I was trying to build a detailed enough simulation to be the dungeon master narrating the game.
Oh,
so I
awesome.
I found a 17th century map of London. I imported that in. It simulates over 1 million agents in real time who have lives and pathfind, right? Goals and try to do things, light levels of interiors of buildings. enough to describe it. And I was using crappy Markov chain generation to make it sound right. Now, I can just throw the contents of an NPC's mind. Yes, they all have history, they all have knowledge, and they all have they all have senses. They know what they see, they know what they hear. Right?
Yeah.
I can just throw that into a chat GPT call.
That's super cool. So this is what you're working on in your.
That's a game I've been building for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
But the point is that agent system, I'm attempting to extract that to build what I just told you about. So everyone's talking about agents saying I'll run 5. I'm like, I have like 1 million running on one machine locally.
Yeah.
Like a literal 1 million. Mine have and mine take a move, and mine take 10 micros to make a move.
What are your business plans with this? This is just all fun, or
so I have a goal, which is I want to solve a couple of very key problems, which is that I want to build a bigger multiplayer game at some point. I've done it before. I'll beat a world record, and me and small friends attempted to do it properly again. But the problem ends up being is everything inside one of these games is fucking complicated. Running that image service is really complicated. Yeah. So you need an orchestration engine which is not reliant on all of the nonsense like Kubernetes. You can't rely on like function calls in places. You need an engine that can just say, so player A wanted to trade sheep for a house, but they're using in-game currency with that. Can we check that's legal in their country while we try and track this trade? Or at Quinkers, my old district startup, it's like, am I legally allowed to deliver this package with this content between these laces through one of the 10 different options I have to deliver it? Like, I need to provide so this was literally quoting delivery prices internationally, right? So international delivery price. I need to give you 5 quotes, all of which need to be legal for the fact that you're trying to send a semi-explosive cargo.
Yeah.
With deodorant cans today, which it was often, right? Yeah. And I need to give you cost-benefit analysis on each one. And I need to be able to sell you a guarantee. And my guarantees were pretty crazy. So I'd often book 2 pickups at different times and then cancel one when we were going to get there. There's a lot of interesting things here. But the point is,
it's a whole lot.
How do you discover the things you need? How do you discover the interfaces? How do you discover the control planes?
There's another edge to the problem that I've been chewing on, which is, what if companies would have, same way that, APIs.json which is the idea of we're going to make an API catalog that's computer readable. What if you would have something like interfaces.json, which is all your interfaces, in something like a sitemap.txt, but for interfaces.
If you could do that, there's 2 interesting things, right? Because actually that if you could do that, you preclude the need to necessarily create a JSON API, a proper REST API. Because you can just rely on the fact that now your interface is programmable. But here's the bigger one. Every accessibility company under the sun will want to talk to you. Imagine here's the random tangential side benefit you probably didn't realize. User interface testing is next to impossible, but you just enumerated every user interface.
Yes. So we thought about accessibility. So we were there's a regulation.
User interface testing is like a $10 billion. It's like a $10 billion industry of user interface testing out there.
We did an accessibility track at API Days in Paris, or we had a focus on accessibility. And Laura came back and she was like, we should be the accessible dev portal. We have some work, so we're not there yet, but this is a gap, and there's 1 more year until the accessibility regulation kicks in.
But that's a massive selling point. You can get so far. I love it when a law changes. You get to be really fun. Like, sorry.
No, but if it's not just about, because I think that APIs, they'll stall a bit and they're not going to get prosecuted. But if this paradigm shift, like what if, because I think actually every single interaction you're making is a discoverability problem. Yep. Because you have to first find the right interface to do the job. And what if there's a computer readable list of all the interfaces so that you can always find the right interface for the right job? We actually made it our new vision for Pronofix. This vision, there's still some big jumps that we're making in hoping that people actually want to buy it. But I think if a couple of things align, this could be really, really big.
Okay, I am intrigued and kind of want to follow along from what's going on, because you reached a very interesting point, which is that like information discoverability is such a big problem. Like, look at people's Confluent from Atlassian Slab is the one we use internally here. All of these information portals, like just if you flip away from developers, just look at the internal wiki sites, internal
Yes.
whatever they are sites, all documentation sites, right?
Yes.
None of that's discoverable in the slightest, right? And like hell, if you just wanted one straightforward piece of magic, just the ability to chew up documentation and attach it to a damn API.
Well, the big bet I think I'm looking at is that we can get marketing excited about this, because then that's a whole different budget, because then it's no longer about, can I save money doing this? It becomes about, actually we need to do this because this is how we make money, and what all of that means. You give me a lot to chew on, and I need to go back and see what that changes in my ideas. Like the thing about money as utility is also a really big one.
Yeah.
Potentially, we could also do like an API resilience podcast where we go into the philosophy. Well, basically, this
I think that would be really, really interesting. It's like resilience is the one thing I find over and over again that recurs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like resilience and durability. And durability is a quality you need to be resilient. So are you familiar with the idea of a tandem nonstop?
Nope.
So it's a physical piece of hardware that gives you an API which will guaranteed work even in case of things like atomic weapons. So the thing is that the resiliency systems goes all the way. So I started out in Miltech when resiliency was a multiple redundancies, physical lockouts type world. And when I was at university, it was space tech, which is even crazier like this. What's interesting is when you start like no one applies this thinking in software. Like Kafka is one of the very few examples where like we have a multiple redundant data source which just streams straight to the disk. And Kafka is beautiful because it's idiotically simple. I love how simple it is. It's heinously difficult to get right, but it's so simple as an idea. Dump it on disk really quickly and send it on. So this is what's cool though, is durability is decoupling. If you're not durable, you're not decoupled. Because if system A depends on system B, and either system A or B is fragile, there is no durability between system A or B.
Yes.
Because if you're reliant on something fragile, you are just as fragile as what you rely on, and that's something people don't get, right? And this is why I keep telling people to use Kafka, because like everyone's like really upset when the database goes down because that's where the data is. But I'm like, but you're allowed your microservice to go down over and over again. So it doesn't really matter how good the database is half the time. Also, here's the other half I would like to talk about. That one is what is an allowable failure, because this is a big deal in user interfaces. So the big thing I always talk about what is failure. Let's say predicting a movie. Classically, if you take more than 2 seconds to predict a movie, the person will leave that screen. They're gone. So how that seems to be fast. But what's more interesting then again is there are certain things humans are good at retrying because we just go, oh, it didn't work. Press it again. There are certain things you're not good at retrying. So how do you surface what retry action is required? So understanding the failure cases again, this is something I've worked a hell of a lot in, but it gets more and more interesting the further you go down this line, because it's things like, we know some of this might take a while. So we're going to do a minimum wait for each user of 5 seconds, so they never get an instant response. Therefore, they get trained to expect a slower response. So games have elevators to go between levels, which are arbitrarily long so the level can load. But what game designers learned a long time ago is loading screens, elevators, whatever, they have now got a minimum length. Because if some are instant and the next one's long, you notice. But if they're all a little bit longer, you don't. But that applies to humans, but it actually applies even more so to machines. So here's the fun one. You have a number of open connections to a API, right? If they return at random intervals, it's very hard to work out how long your API is going to take. But if there's a max, but if the API always takes a second to come back, you spread out spikes, you spread out load, but you also have a way to know what's going on at any point in time. So an instant return isn't either a success or a failure, but there's a kind of expectancy, because then the system buffering can be programmed better, the caching can be done better, everything. So you say return as fast as possible, but in a minimum of, let's say, the 200 milliseconds is our fastest possible response. It's not the most efficient way, but you'll be surprised how many things don't break when you know this. Also, it means you have a safety margin of we need to kill the service for some reason. Instead of everything which is active will die.
One thing I was thinking about was that all this stuff that we're doing, it's a layer of magic that we're creating over society or over everything.
Yes.
Like action at a distance, minimal effort, doing amazing, crazy things. Basically, we're becoming all magicians. That this utility, this new utility, which whatever it is, if it's, do you think that the interface itself is becoming utility, or is it the thing that is served by the interface that is becoming utility?
I can make an argument for both, but I would normally opt to say that, because at a certain point, everything becomes a certain level of commodity. It's like the travel agent versus just going, like rather than calling the airline, you call the travel agent, right? Then your travel agent got consumed into a booking service, right? Mm-hmm. So some things both consolidate down, but then you get specialisms that consolidate out, which then distill out. So the answer is they are both, because of the thing you need is obviously a utility, but sometimes the interface is and isn't, depending on what it's offering you. So is Google a utility, or is Google not? That's the question I always ask. And the answer is sometimes Google's the utility, because it means you actually discover something you didn't know about. Most of the time, it's just a way to get there. Because even if I know what I want, I just type it into Google.
But is it well, one question is like, how do you define utility?
Oh yeah. I'm just running on a kind of rough model of it has to grant value in of itself.
I think the one that I'm currently, this whole thing got sparked because of Worley mapping. So we're talking about API as products, but Worley mapping says that products turns into utility or commodity. But then because APIs are networked. Yes. Like a networked commodity is a utility. Yes. And this is how I got here. Like as in an enabling layer of standardization and infrastructure that now creates something completely unexpected that now suddenly becomes possible. That's what I was looking at. That's like, yeah.
So that actually makes more sense for things like that. Well, Google would clearly be a utility. Because there are certain things Google, you couldn't, there's all things that would never exist without a Google, like Wikipedia. It's a commodity. It's not like it's commodities, but it's utility because what it allows you to do. Okay, cool.
But then the question is the interface to it, is the API, is that the thing that is the network thing, or is it the whole thing? Like it's back to the same problem of, is the API the product, or is the product the thing that bundles that's wrapped around the API? Then it's the same thing again, I think.
Yeah, it's hard. So the commodity is always going to be the thing you want. I would never. An API itself is very rarely a commodity. It always exposes a commodity. Yeah. Right. Same, but of course it can be. No, that's incorrect. A commodity is in the eye of the beholder. Fundamentally, a commodity is something the agent in the system needs the commodity to do something. They might use a series of utilities to get it. So it might, the API being one of those utilities or whatever else, or access points. I don't know. We're reaching the edge of where my vernacular, to use the right word, is falling apart a little bit.
The power that you're getting from the electricity network, that is actually the electricity.
But it's not, the thing is, it's like having you have an electrical powered washing, well, let's say mill. It makes a good. You can make the good without the electricity, but it just wouldn't be as good. So the goods are the commodity. The
weird new thing, or the really special thing that because there's not too many of these like things that we've invested humongous amounts of money and time and energy and materials into to enable it. Like, and one is like water, like streaming water. Another one is electricity. Another one is telecommunication. They're like paradigm shifts in like standardization of something that was not standard before that now suddenly recontextualizes something really important for us. Anyway, thank you for humoring me.
No worries.
Thank you very, very much.
It's really interesting.
Amazing to talk with you, and you've sparked a whole bunch of ideas. This episode was brought to you by Pronovix. You can learn more about our company at pronovix.com. Thank you for listening. That's it for this episode.